pierce through the stars. Exploit prime.
You know what? I think it's pretty crazy Crow Games decided to give away Xiangli Yao for free because, as you just saw, his damage is quite insane, and there's a lot of surprising things about him. So, in this video, I'm gonna be going over how to build Xiangli and play him so that you can beat some of the hardest content in the game with this free 5-star unit. Okay, let's start with the most crucial part of the video, how to achieve best Xiangli's potential and how do his abilities work. I'll be using him with the Void Thunder 5 set, while his main echo is going to be the Thundering Mephis, but as always, I'll explain all of his builds later in the video. Oh, and keep in mind, this footage is from a test server, so the content shown here is subject to change. Alright, starting off with the normal attacks, it's a really cool looking 5-hit combo, and surprisingly enough, the last hit does have a decent multiplier. However, the animation is very long and locks Xiangli in place, so make sure to dash cancel or swap cancel the 5th hit to save time. Now, his heavy attack is like whatever, pretty clunky, even if it looks stylish, and same goes for the mid-air attack. It's decent and you can sorta spam his plunges quickly, although it will eat up stamina super fast. Moving over, his skill by default is very simple. It just deals decent damage in a small AoE, but it does only have a 5-second cooldown, which is nice. Still, the way his skill works will depend on how you manage his forte gauge and ultimate, because there's a total of 4 different skills you can unleash, which are called Deduction, Decipher, Divergence, and Law of Rains. Now, you already saw Deduction. It's the most basic and easily achievable skill, so nothing too amazing about it. However, notice how when Xiangli deals normal attack damage, his forte gauge increases? Well, Deduction also does the same. In fact, it almost fills half the bar, so it's very useful to start fights. Still, once the forte gauge bar is full, the skill cooldown immediately resets, and now you can cast Decipher, which will consume the forte bar and deal about twice as much damage Deduction would do. However, if you also immediately press the normal attack button right after Decipher, he will launch a mid-air attack called Revamp, which deals decent amount of damage, but it will also be a very significant tactic you can utilize when he is in the ultimate mode. So let's talk about Xiangli's Resonance Liberation, also known as Ultimate. Initially, he will deal a big funny number, which is always great for clickbait thumbnails. And then you will notice his forte gauge has become different. Now there's 5 bars you want to fill up as fast as possible and deal best amount of damage. But, where have I seen this before? Big attack, 5 bars, Electro 5-star unit, a guy. Oh wait, is Xiangli Yao here to replace Calcharo? Well, I'll talk about this later in the video, but for now, let's just focus on the ultimate. So yeah, once it's cast and big damage is dealt, Xiangli enters Intuition mode for 24 seconds, which you can easily maintain even when swapping back and forth. Now, his basic and heavy attacks will be replaced by new attacks, which is now going to be a 3-hit combo. But at the same time, his skill is also replaced by a new one called Divergence, which has a slightly longer 7-second cooldown, but it deals a lot more damage than the base Deduction skill. Oh, and his dodge counter is also replaced by this one called Unfathomed, which actually also packs a ton of punch, no pun intended. But most importantly, Xiangli during Intuition also gains 3 hypercubes, which you can see floating around him here. Anytime you fill up the new Forte's 5 bars, you can tap the skill immediately since the cooldown is reset, and he will unleash the strongest variant of the skill called Law of Rains, while at the same time, 1 hypercube will be consumed. So in other words, unleash 3 Law of Rains and he exits the Intuition mode, which means you want to get these 3 most powerful skills out as soon as possible after you cast his ultimate. So how do you fill up those 5 bars quickly? Well, remember Revamp I mentioned? Basically, if you cast the skill and then immediately press normal attack, he will obtain all 5 bars. I guess I should call them performance capacity as the game describes it, but let's just stick to me calling them bars. Anyway, that's one fast way to obtain them, plus you capitalize on some chunky multipliers. But you can also gain bars by the following methods. The first hit of the basic attack will generate 1 bar, but the second and third hit both will generate 2 bars. So if you do the whole 3-hit combo, you get the 5 bars. You can also gain 2 bars when triggering dodge counter. However, as I mentioned, the fastest way, 2 bars are gained when you cast the skill, and 3 bars are gained from Revamp. Now, if we look at the most basic rotation, let's say you start the fight with ultimate ready. First, tap the skill button and immediately trigger the ultimate, then use the skill button again, followed by normal attack, which gives you the first 5 bars, so press the skill to trigger Law of Rains. Then, since the skill is still on cooldown, either use 3-hit combo or maybe 2 hits and a dodge counter, then trigger Law of Rains with skill button, then press the skill button again, and normal attack immediately after to gain the final and last Law of Rains, which of course you want to trigger with the skill button again. Yeah, a lot of skill button mashing here at the right moment, but once you get the hang of things, it's honestly not that super hard to remember. Also, since you can easily play him in quick swap teams, keep in mind a lot of his animations are pretty long, but as you can see here, you can easily swap cancel all of them when utilizing other teammates, so save time and prevent him from getting interrupted or damaged. Speaking of which, his second inherent skill grants him resistance to interruption during intuition mode, but I would say it's not super reliable. For example, against Scar boss fight, he can easily get knocked around, so keep that in mind. And as for the first inherent skill, anytime he casts the skill, he gains 5% electro damage bonus up to 4 times for 8 seconds, so doesn't matter which of the 4 skill variants you cast, he will naturally build this up to 20% electro damage bonus pretty easily. Oh, and most importantly, a lot of his damage is treated as Resonance Liberation. For example, Decipher, Law of Rains, and Revamp are considered to be Resonance Liberation damage type, which is going to be important when deciding which weapons, echoes, and teammates you want to utilize for him. Essentially, this guy thrives best in his ultimate form, since it allows him to unleash the most amount of damage. While outside of the ultimate, he is fine, about as good as Calcharo or Jian when they're not using their ultimates. But the key difference here is that you can easily manage his ultimate playstyle in quick swap teams, since the duration is pretty long and you don't have to rush like a madman to get all 3 of those hypercubes out. But yeah, that's pretty much it when it comes to Xiangli's playstyle. Next, let's talk about his build. So here's the situation. Xiangli's weapon options are pretty lacking. Basically, there's a couple of great choices, while everything else is below them. Okay, starting off with the signature gauntlets, Verity's handle are pretty good. It provides the much needed critical rate from the substat and a bunch of damage boosting, 12% attribute bonus and 48% liberation damage bonus, which also can be extended by 5 seconds up to 3 times when using a skill, so in other words, it should last for 23 seconds total, more than enough to fully utilize all 3 Law of Rains from his ultimate. I mean, what more do I need to say? It's his best in slot choice by a big margin. Then there's Abyss Surges. Hopefully you picked it up from the supply chest because it's more or less one of the most reliable stat sticks for him, since he can obtain quite a lot of attack and some extra energy regen, which both are super useful to him. But the latter part of the passive, it's fine, but nothing amazing. Still, moving over to 4-star options, the best of the bunch by far is going to be Stone Art, the Battle Pass Gauntlets, crit rate from substat, and a really nice passive which boosts his Resonance Liberation damage by 18% or 54% at max copies for 15 seconds. Granted, the duration is a bit shorter than I would like it to be, especially if you play him in quick swap teams, so he might not fully utilize this passive till the very last Law of Rains. But hey, this weapon is basically next best thing if you want to maximize his damage output. And then we have a bunch of 4-star and 3-star rejects, more or less. The craftable gauntlets number 21D offer a weird passive bonus, which empowers dodge and counterattacks, which is fine, but the best thing about it is the massive amount of energy regen you can get from the substat, which helps him trigger the ultimate reliably. Then there's Hollow Mirage. Just treat it as an attack stat stick, especially if you don't get hit after casting the ultimate. Then there's also Marcato, but it's like a bit better than the craftable 4-star option if we talk about energy issues. And then finally, if you got none of the gauntlets, Originite Type 4 or Gauntlets of the Night are decent poor man's choice. Anyway, here's a quick recap and ranking of the weapons. Just keep in mind, I do place emphasis on energy regen to try and pull the weight of some of the gauntlets. Moving over, let's talk about the echoes and stats. First of all, we've got the super reliable and easy to use Void Thunder set. More or less, it will consistently provide 40% electro damage bonus after triggering his skill 2 times, so it works well in both quick swap and on-field playstyles. And as for the main Echo, if you land his final hit, Thundering Mephis provides Resonance Liberation and Electro Damage boosting, so both of the buffs are very relevant for Xiangli. However, if you want to use something with shorter animation, Tempest Mephis is fine too. Of course, there's also the Flawless for those who want quick energy regen. But there's also the good old Lingering Tunes set, although I would mostly recommend this option if you're planning to play him on field, meaning he stays for the whole ultimate duration and you unleash those 3 Law of Rains, because otherwise, quick swapping forces the 5-set bonus to reset, so keep this in mind. And as for support options like Moonlit or Rejuvenating Set, his Concerto Energy Regeneration isn't the best, but as a massive cope, you could use the Originite Type 4 Gauntlet with Rejuvenating Set to at least activate the set's bonus. Otherwise, you can also just go for double 2-set of Lingering and Thunder. But moving over to main stats, the classic 4-3-3-1-1 still reigns supreme here, and it is the recommended loadout. So as always, go for crit rate or crit damage 4 cost Echo, double Electro or a mix of Electro and attack percent for 3 costs, and for the most obvious 1 cost Echoes, double attack percentage. As a side note for the 3 cost Echoes, the choice of whether to go for double Electro or Electro/attack percent really depends on the team comps and how you play him, and the difference isn't that huge, at least from my initial testing. But you can also go for 4-4-1-1-1, since both Mephis can be utilized for the Void Thunder 5 set, although it won't be as good as the usual 4-3-3-1-1, but that's what most already know anyway. Finally, we've got the substats. Now, it is a bit tricky when it comes to energy regen, since it heavily varies what team comp and playstyle you choose to go for, but overall, you want to get at least some amount of energy regen, 5 to 20% at the minimum. Although, if you are using a weapon that provides energy, then you're pretty much fine. And yeah, afterwards, you just want to focus on the usual crit rate and crit damage substats, then attack percent and resonance liberation damage bonus afterwards. Anyway, that's pretty much it when it comes to the build. So for video skippers, here's everything you need to know, plus I've also included the skills leveling priority. If a dog is man's best friend, then Xiangli is free-to-play players' best friend, I guess. I mean, look, this guy definitely doesn't provide much in terms of boosting other teammates. His outro skill actually just deals damage periodically whenever the activated unleashes basic attack, and this can happen up to 3 times in 8 seconds. So he kinda delivers coordinated attacks with the outro, but pretty much besides that, his intro skill is just a small attack, so this guy is pure offense, zero support. Well, I guess the best kind of support is when you destroy everything, right? Anyway, looking at some team recommendations, Verena and Yinlin is probably the strongest team comp if you decide to play him on field, since keep in mind, that powerful electro damage plus resonance liberation boost Yinlin provides will only remain active if Xiangli doesn't switch out. But regardless, this team is pretty cracked if fully utilized. You can put Verena on Rejuvenating Set with Bellborn Echo, while Yinlin should be using the Moonlit Set with Heron to further boost Xiangli's damage. But if you don't have Yinlin, you could also go for Genshin, who provides a massive boost to resonance liberation damage. Now, for an absolutely free-to-play variation, going with Baiji and Yang Yang is fine, but by this point, I assume you have at least a couple of 5 stars sitting in your account. So if you want to go for a quick swap comp, something like Verena Encore works pretty nicely. Although you could also just simply go with a previous team of Yinlin and Verena, if you're fine with the idea of losing Yinlin's outro buff when swapping out. Otherwise, throw in the obligatory Havoc Rover that I've mentioned, I believe, in all of my guide videos so far. I mean, yeah, this is a fine unit if you have no buffers or supports you can choose from. Before we get to my final thoughts about this Calcharo Slayer, here's what you need to know whether it's better to go for Xiangli's sequences or the signature gauntlets. So, the first sequence allows Law of Rains to hit 6 more times each time. Now, I know it sounds crazy since it already delivers a ton of damage, but it's a much smaller scaling as you can see here. Then, the second sequence is pretty simple. When you cast the skill or ultimate, he gains 30% crit damage for 8 seconds. But since you'll be casting the skill pretty much 24/7, this buff is like a permanent stat increase, to be honest. Now, the third one is pretty interesting. After the ultimate is cast, the next 5 resonance skills will deal 63% more damage. And if using the combo I've shown previously, 2 divergences and all 3 Law of Rains essentially get this boost no questions asked, which is nice. However, remember how I said Xiangli is selfish? Well, at S4, he actually boosts everyone's resonance liberation damage by a whopping 25% bonus for 30 seconds after casting his own ultimate. So now he will feel a lot better in certain teams. And then the 5th sequence will essentially give a huge boost to his outro skill, the one that kinda acts like a coordinated attack. And on top of that, the initial hit of the ultimate is further boosted. Finally, S6 basically gives an even more disgusting power boost to Law of Rain's attacks. I mean, at this point, you're just flexing if you're going for S6. Still, which one is better, signature weapon or S1? I would definitely go for the weapon because it provides quite a big boost in damage, and you can also easily use it with other gauntlet units if they are not in the same team when doing Tower of Adversity. But yeah, that's pretty much Xiangli Yao, a really super solid unit that everyone can obtain for free, and it's a 5-star no less. Now, I will say that his weapon options are lacking if you do not go for the signature or Abyss Surges or the Battle Pass gauntlets, so keep that in mind. But other than that, yeah, I don't know what Calcharo players are thinking right now. To me, this guy feels a lot less clunky to play. Filling up those 5 bars is super easy to do, although I will admit even with the inherent skill unlocked, his resistance to interruption isn't the greatest. So I do recommend practicing those dodge counters, since they do reward you with 2 bars for Forte Gauge. But let me know in the comments if you want me to compare Xiangli Yao against Calcharo, and we can finally see who's good at what. Anyway, hope you found this video useful, and as always, don't forget to press the like button and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.